It's a pleasure to be with you here in Chicago, and on the background we have all the high-rise building.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate the fact that you took your time and to have this interview. I'm sure that there are many people that are interested to hear your thoughts and what you think about many issues that just a common person in the street ask about the earthquakes. So in that respect, I mean, we really appreciate it. So and certainly, I mean, I had the privilege to work with you for a couple of years, and then we did collaborate with each other. And I think we even published a paper together on earthquake engineering after the Kobe earthquakes. So it's really good to meet up again, and certainly from my viewpoints, if somebody asks me, name one person in the world that knows more about the earthquake engineering and as far as the design specification goes and the design code goes, who that one person would be, I would say, well, it's Ghosh.
That's kind of you, but anyway.
So I'm pretty sure that our listeners are very interested to know about you a little more on a personal level. Okay, so if you allow me, I would like to take you back to your childhood and tell us where you got your education and the road that took you from when you were a little kid, to now that you are one of the most recognizable figures in the earthquake engineering.
Yeah, I come from India, grew up in India, and went to a number of schools from grade 3 where I started to grade 11 because my father had a transferable job. We had to move every 2-3 years. As I was approaching high school graduation, obviously the question of what I was going to do next had to be faced. As long as I have known things in India, there was always a dominant profession. Like if you could get into it, you went into it. In my father's time, it was the legal profession, so he was a lawyer, then became a judge. I went into engineering or civil engineering in particular because that was the profession. Shortly after my time, it became the medical profession. Then it was IT. I think very recently there are more choices than one because there is a lot of economic expansion, but that was not the case when I graduated high school. But it was not a matter of just deciding I would go into engineering. The competition to get into engineering school was extremely tough. Anyway, I made it and got into engineering school, and then structural engineering was my choice, conscious choice. That's what kind of fascinated me rather than transportation or environmental engineering and things like that. So that's briefly the story.
All right. Okay. Good enough. So let's come back to earthquake engineering, right? And you've been in the field of the earthquake engineering for many years, and very much involved with the entities that are responsible to maintain our design codes. So if you look at the big picture, I mean, how do you see the earthquake engineering has evolved from the past to the present time? We'll come back to the future later on, but How do you think has evolved?
Yeah, I was thinking about this when uh, a layman often asks or makes a statement, my building is good for magnitude 6 earthquake. The statement does not make any sense at all, because magnitude is a measure of energy released at source. If the source of an earthquake is a fault and the fault moved, how much energy was released in the process? That's what magnitude is all about. If you are close to the origin, a magnitude 6 earthquake will probably totally wipe you out. If you are 500 miles away, you probably won't feel it. So it is not just the magnitude of the earthquake. There are three things involved. The source mechanism, generally speaking, that's what we call it. What kind of a source? Is it a fault? Is it a subduction zone? Then what kind of a movement was it? If it was a fault, how large a movement, how fast a movement, all of that goes into the source mechanism. And then the source to site transmission path is the second thing. Are the seismic waves coming through rock-like material? Is it coming through alluvium, soft material? And the distance, obviously. So that determines the seismic waves that arrive at the site. Then there is modification of those waves by the soils at the site, particularly if the soil is soft. Then the rock motion would be magnified, and that's what the structures located at the site will feel. And when you talk about past and present, our understanding of all three have. I think by the 50s we kind of had an idea, and by the turn of the century we kind of knew. We had a pretty good handle on, I would say, all three. That doesn't mean perfect knowledge by any means, but we had a pretty good handle on all three parts. So that's pretty much the past and the present. The present is also the same. It is the recent things that are happening is we have a lot more sophisticated tools. We can analyze things. We have a lot more data that we have gathered. And we are becoming more ambitious. We are not content, as we always were, to just prevent collapse of buildings in a major earthquake. We now think that our buildings should keep on functioning following an earthquake, or like we would like them to. So the societal ambition, if you like, is kind of changing societal expectation. So that's what is happening lately.
Okay, all right. Like you say, I mean, we know quite a bit. Compared to, let's say, even 50s. We know quite a bit. Now, with all the tools that we have, with all the knowledge that we have gained, I know you'll be following the February 2023 earthquake in Syria and Turkey. I know it's a little bit early. Still, there's a group that are investigating. They have gone to the sites, and we have seen some reports. But we kind of have a pretty good idea what the most reasons why there were so much casualties and economic damage. From your viewpoints, what do you contribute? That we've seen so many, more than 50,000 people lost their life in the earthquakes, and the economic damage that took place is significant. In recent time, it's probably one of the biggest ones. In your opinion, what do you contribute that to?
A disaster of that magnitude is never because of one factor, so it's always a lot of combinations. So even we engineers think of earthquake damage being caused by the shaking. The waves travel from the source to site and they move the foundation underneath the structure. The rest of the structure cannot follow all that readily because of the inertia. So the structure tries to catch up with the movement of the foundation. The structure is set in motion and that causes damage, has the potential at least to cause damage. But the shaking is only part of the picture. There is ground failure in an earthquake that can be of various. One of the most common is landslide. We are all familiar with landslides, and against landslide there is no defense, and there is no amount of engineering we can do.
Liquefaction.
Yeah, one of the bigger ones is liquefaction. Okay. The liquefaction at the worst is the soil at the site becomes literally a liquid. So a structure that you thought was solidly founded is now floating. It's like a ship, and it's very easy for it to topple over. Then there is direct rupture, the fault. In Turkey in 1999, I saw fault rupture going through literally somebody's bedroom, diagonally through the bedroom. So part of the bedroom was here, and the remainder of the bedroom and the remainder of the house was several feet away. That can happen. And again, you don't have any defense. The only thing you can do is stay away from known faults. And that is easier said than done. People like to build in attractive places, and then there is something called lateral spread. That's also a kind of ground failure. If it happens, the structure founded on that soil is in trouble. In Turkey, all of these things happen in this earthquake, and in past earthquakes. There were landslides, fault rupture, like incredible, like it went through entire fields, entire parts of town. Liquefaction, unbelievable. 99, we saw a lot of liquefaction. This time it was considerably worse.
That's right.
Liquefaction is not like landslide that you cannot do anything. If you are aware of the potential and that can be determined, you can improve the site. It costs money, but it can be done. And obviously, you can also stay away from sites with high liquefaction potential. So we are not totally defenseless against liquefaction as we are under landslide or fault rupture. Lateral spread, again, there is not much control, nothing much we can do by way of engineering. When it comes to ground shaking, so I mentioned soft soil already, magnifies rock motion. Through human civilization, men have built cities along rivers for obvious reasons, transportation. And when river flows through a town, that automatically means subsoils. As you approach the river, and for San Francisco on the bay, there is so-called Bay Mud, which is so the subsoil magnifies rock motion, and quite a bit of that happened in this Turkish earthquake. many times with rivers flowing through them. But having said all of that, by far the biggest factor, I think, was the lack of code enforcement. Turkey has had fairly good building codes for a long time, and the latest one, I don't have the date, very recent, I am told is as good as any earthquake code in the country. But the enforcement is very severely lacking.
2018, I think, was the latest version.
Well, 2018, talking about enforcement, the government or Mr. Erdogan in particular offered amnesty to buildings that were in building code violation. So all a owner had to do is to pay a fine, and that made his or her building legitimate. They now had a permit. And that kind of thing an earthquake wouldn't respect,
Right.
So I honestly believe that by far the biggest factor was that codes are not enforced. And that's where a lot of improvement needs to be made.
That's great. So, given all that, I mean, I know it's easier to suggest something than do it, because you have to have the resources and all that. And given a resource that you have, and if you were going to give one advice to agencies or people that are in charge of the keeping up with the infrastructures in Turkey, because we know it's going to happen again. Not there, but somewhere else. What would you advise? What would you tell them to do to prevent this type of devastation that we see?
Yeah, code enforcement, I do not believe is a matter of resource. I have found wherever I have been, it's a matter of political will, and essentially it takes, how do I put it? You have to not exactly eradicate, but you have to minimize corruption. Otherwise, it's very, very difficult. Code enforcement has two parts. There is what we typically call plan check. Somebody competent has to go through the building plans in California. That includes calculations, which probably won't happen in Turkey. But anyway, plan check. Without a plan check, a municipality should not offer a construction permit. Construction should not even start. And then, very importantly, inspection by the building department to make sure that things are being built according to plan, according to code. Now, if you can buy a construction permit for money, or if an inspector is going to write a favorable report because he was paid, then code enforcement falls down. So that is something that would be the biggest part of my advice. The second thing I discovered is in Turkey, developers have a lot more decision making than the engineer, which I didn't realize, and that I think they need to take a look at and hopefully change, because the developer most of the time wouldn't be competent to make the decisions. So anyway, these are the couple of thoughts.
But there are some other. I agree. I think there are some other factors too with respect to the adequacy of some of the design tools that they use and so on. But by far, in the code enforcement is really the bottom line. And we can contribute it to the many factors, but it comes back to having the buildings and the bridges that are designed and constructed based on the latest knowledge. And so, and it wasn't because we have many good structural engineers.
Oh yeah.
They're very knowledgeable.
No
so it's not the lack of that, certainly.